So what's that on this bottom side activity is that you're going to associate sort of safety with the car. So you want to see if you can kind of work back to these more simple models and then kind of build back and elaborate your perspectives. I think it makes marketing quite a bit easier, right? So you're often trying to kind of generate some response. What response is that you're trying to generate? And understanding sort of how people act and respond and think is a big part of achieving those different outcomes. So the marketing stimuli, then a lot of times the product, price, place, promotion, these different things kind of achieve these different outcomes, these different responses in the end. Right? Okay, so this is just showing you one model, right? This is just showing you one model of motivation. You guys have had this already. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You had it in management, right? OB? Yeah. Undergrad? Okay, so you've had it in a lot of different places, right? So how does it show up in marketing? How would it apply to marketing?
Customer needs is one of the big components of 5 C's.
Yeah, and so what is Maslow trying to say about those needs?
You start at the bottom, and once you satisfy the bottoms, you can start thinking about the levels above.
Okay, exactly. So you kind of start at the bottom. So Maslow is saying you sort of start at the bottom, and you can kind of think about some of these other needs that kind of rise higher and higher as you move up the list, right? So how would you take like a Maslow's hierarchy and overlay sort of this? You guys remember the slide on competition and defining competition? So we only have like 50 slides that I refer to most. So it's the first set of slides, right? So what's the deal with competition? What are the errors I can make on the competition side? We may not differentiate my product. So that's actually a good note. That's one of those slides. So that's a different slide than the one I was thinking about. You may not differentiate your product. So differentiation and competition should be pretty much related. But if I'm not trying to identify my competitor, my competitive set, who are my competitors? What are the two mistakes that I can make? So, see, marketing, we're all making sort of.
Well, the one mistake is thinking you're competing with one firm when you're really competing with a totally different firm. I don't know. I can't explain exactly how that.
Or defining it too narrowly, right? So if I define my competitive set too narrowly, what's that called? Myopia, right? I'm nearsighted with myopic. So it can be myopic, right? I can define my set too narrowly, or I can define it too broadly, right? So it can be too broad in defining that set. So, the example might be if I'm, the example that I think I used in class that first day was Toyota, right? So Toyota might define its competitors, and it might say that its competitors is sort of just Honda, right? So that's sort of like I'm just competing with Honda. It might say it's all automobile manufacturers, right? It might say it's all transportation, or it might say it's sort of all things that compete for the same consumer dollars in a very generic sense. So see, I'm kind of using that to kind of broaden out my competitive set. So if I was going to overlay Maslow's thinking onto that same idea of defining competitors, how do I do that?
Well, when you said competing for all dollars, if you were targeting your car towards the esteem, but somebody can't meet their other needs, those are basal competitors that you're not necessarily getting.
Okay, so the argument that sort of is kind of going to be lower in terms of motivation on the hierarchy is going to be more appealing, right? So in terms of my positioning alternatives, if my message is more about self-actualization, but the needs of the markets that I'm trying to serve are more about sort of basic needs, then it becomes very difficult for me to kind of go after that sort of thing. So sometimes I am competing in self-actualization markets, though, right? Who competes in self-actualization markets? What are some brands who operate in that space? Banana?
Say the smart car, maybe.
The smart car?
People want to be green.
Okay, people look at, yeah, so there may be some smart car kind of things that are self-actualization, positioning, right? What else?
Yoga class.
Yoga class? Yoga is self-actualization. Some people might think of that as basic needs. So one of the things to note is like different markets think about some of these things in different ways, right? So some people may think of yoga as sort of this is a basic need. I have to have this to survive psychologically. Do you believe that? This is Lord. Yes.
Like money managers?
Money managers.
like Fidelity and
Okay.
Goldman, Merrill, self-actualizing. People get to their retirement, live the golden years. They're not there yet, but they're going to position them to reach.
Okay, what types of funds though for self-actualization? Are some funds just basic needs funds? I mean, could you just take it within that industry and start sort of breaking down who you sell, what are you selling to the self-actualization folks, and what are you selling to sort of the basic needs?
They have life cycle funds now.
Okay, are you a money manager? Or not?
No, I'm not.
No,
But
okay.
I'm trying to think of firms that.
Who's a money manager? Somebody's a money manager. No.
Hedge funds.
Hedge funds, okay, so different types of funds are going to have sort of different appeals for different markets, right? So it's sort of like self-actualization may be the nature of the fund, right? I mean, you can have funds can be green funds, right? So you can have funds that are sort of investing in mostly just green initiatives, green outcomes, right? It's the same sort of idea that you guys had on the smart car, right? It's just the fund is sort of into these types of stocks, right? Where the fund is into sort of a lower level type of stock, and so different people might be motivated in different ways to buy those different funds. Yes.
I'd throw out not-for-profits too.
Okay. Not
Who
for
are
profit.
competing for charity dollars or limited charity dollars.
Okay. So give me some more just regular kind of old-fashioned brands.
Oh.
You guys have any brands? Any brands operating in that space? Yes.
Rosetta Stone.
Okay. Rosetta Stone. So why do you see them there?
So because that sort of enables you to develop knowledge in a foreign language.
Okay. What about Louis Vuitton? I threw that one out. Who buys Louis Vuitton stuff? Does anybody buy Louis? You buy Louis Vuitton? Okay, very good. You have a Louis Vuitton item. This is very high end.
Not with you.
Not with you. Okay, it's hard to take home at night. Stuff like that. Gucci. Okay, very good. Gucci versus
I like
Louis
purses.
Vuitton.
I like purses.
Which one's higher and lower? Louis Vuitton's pretty high, right? Is that higher than
I
yours?
like both. I just like purses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So see, some of these brands sort of are going to go much higher on sort of the, how much is a Louis Vuitton purse?
It depends.
It depends. Yeah, what's the cheapest one? Let's say.
Probably like cheap if you go canvas. It's not leather. Probably like around $500 or $600.
$500 or $600.
Would be
Right?
the cheapest one you could find.
Okay. Okay, very good.
Actually, like a separate example, I was thinking of like school. Like a lot of the people in this class right now, we're all like, it's not undergraduate school, so we're all here for an extra reason. So the way the universities brand to, like the Harvard, like all the different universities and Weatherhead, using the sustainability and the lead by design classes would be an example of us doing self-development to, do something with the MBA. That's not necessarily a requirement as far as education is concerned.
Okay, good. So just sort of thinking, so Maslow's is just sort of like one theory on motivation. So there are other theories on motivation. The reason I'm sort of just using this one is what you're exposed to. But a lot of times this is sort of what you're thinking about, is what motivates people to buy, right? And how do they sort of think about value in different ways? Different people sort of value different things. So this is another slide that kind of says, okay, at some point I may want to look at different markets and try to break down how they make decisions. So I might say, okay, this is sort of a market in which there's some problem recognition, right? Somebody might have an actual state and a desired state, right? Okay, so does anybody recognize that automobile?
It's like a Volkswagen Jetta to me.
It's Chevrolet Sprint. The Chevrolet Sprint. Okay, so this is my college days, right? My college days, I was driving the Chevrolet Sprint. They would have loved that here, right? I drove this to work now. My colleagues would be like, man, Gary is so cool. He's out of the SUV, driving the Sprint. But I'm driving this vehicle, I'm going to pick up dates in that vehicle, right? So that's my actual state, right? So what was my desired state? It's probably something more like that, right? What is that car? How much does that car cost?
1.7 million.
A lot more than I had in college, right? A lot more than I have now. But I have, we might, is this what you got?
I just like purses.
Just persons. This is sort of the Louis Vuitton of automobiles. Okay, so I recognize I had a problem. There's a difference sort of between my actual state and my desired state. So my desired state is way up there. So I start doing an information search. I start searching for different things. I think about internal sources. I think about external sources. And then I kind of weight these different factors about different cars and evaluate the different alternatives. This is sort of, some of the evaluation of alternative states that may go up. And then I come to kind of purchase decision. So what cars might I think about? What might be some of the other automobiles that say I can't kind of reach that ultimate desired state? And what are some more intermediate things between the Sprint and the
Corolla S.
The Corolla S. Corolla S would be pretty good. That's actually good. What else is in that space?
An aftermarket spoiler.
An aftermarket spoiler to go on my Sprint. That's probably something I should have thought of. You're a little bit like other vehicles that sort of fit in that space. What else? A Mustang. Okay, so a Mustang's getting a lot closer, right? A Mustang's sort of getting there. That might actually do the trick, right? My dates may not feel as bad like getting into a Mustang. So, what about this vehicle? That's a bet. That's an old bet. I mean, we have to go. You're going back in time with me, folks. This is not a modern day actual versus desired state. Okay, so let's say you end up deciding I want to buy a Chevrolet Bed. So one of the things that happens, you go to the dealership, right? And there are these situational, unanticipated factors that happen, right? So when I get to the dealership, what's the situational factor?
It's more expensive than
This guy's a situational factor, right? So a situational factor might be the person sort of in the car dealership who's trying to sell cars. What's the situational factor in the Tata Nano case?
the showrooms are too flashy.
The showrooms are
The showrooms are too flashy, right? So this is a situational factor that once somebody's made a decision, I want to go buy a Nano, I get to that outcome, it sort of changes my purchase decision. So eventually you kind of get into this post-purchase behavior. So you make a decision, once you've made the purchase, you get into kind of an evaluation of satisfaction or dissatisfaction. What was one of my objectives in buying a new vehicle, right? What do you think was one of the objectives?
Yes, to the desired state. Most certainly.
Yes, but what's my psychological motivation for having a vehicle other than the Chevrolet Sprint? This is college.
More
Girls.
dates.
Impressing
Girls. Yeah. So when I go to pick up my dates, I want them to be more excited about getting into this vehicle, right? So I'm going to have some response to that, right? At some point, I'm going to start going, I'm going to go pick up dates. I'm no longer showing up in the Sprint, showing up in the Corvette or the Trans Am or the Mustang, right? Or I put a spoiler on the back. I love that. You may have a secret market. I get some kind of response from that, right? Then I can kind of go back and I can reevaluate what was my pre-purchase expectations and what's the post-purchase performance. Does it have the desired effect that I hoped it would have or not? And that's sort of how I figure out, am I satisfied with my purchase or not? And if I'm not satisfied, then of course I go back through this. So this is another slide, right? So if I took kind of what's the total set, I talked about this one a little bit, right? This is the total set of all PCs that might exist. We kind of went through different brands. And you might think about narrowing those down and having different effects with your marketing at different levels. Like sometimes people aren't aware of your brand, so your focus may be developing awareness. I want people to actually be aware that I have a brand that's out there. Sometimes it might be they're aware of your brand, but they're affective, right? The emotional response to your brand is negative, or it's not positive enough for you to sort of be in the consideration set, right? So you may be trying to get into the consideration set. The consideration set is a broader set than the choice set. The choice set is sort of thought of as a set where you really spend a lot more time evaluating those alternatives and you really think a lot about them. And I wouldn't have thought the spoiler would be there, but I think it made it. So it's one of those surprise entries in my choice set. Yes, exactly. The situation factor. I went to the dealerships and the spoilers there, just what I needed, right? So the choice set, then when you get to the choice set, these are the ones that if you're really sort of comparing, it might be like, going back to the Toyota, this is the Toyota, Toyota Corolla S competing with the Honda Accord. There's not an S, it's a TX or something. What's the LX? What's the LX? LX, okay, so Honda Accord LX, right? It's actually kind of moved up right on the Accord. The Accord should be competing for what? The Camry. Oh, okay, see, so you can see how these different sort of things come into play. What makes it down to the set, and what's the trade-off that I end up kind of going with? That's so your problem could be once they learn more about your vehicle, they make a decision. Then they read consumer reports, the reliability ratings are low, the gas pedal gets stuck. These sorts of things, right? That they discover as they go into the market, maybe kind of what affects it. And a lot of times you're trying to figure out sort of where are you having problems kind of converting with this whole conversion, right? So you talk, for example, about converting people from the 2 liters. So you might just be looking at that market of 2 liters, and why are we not sort of making the conversions we'd like? So sometimes you can think about these markets in sort of simpler stages, right? So if I do these stages, this is one of the hierarchy of effects models that exist. But I like to sort of simplify things. You guys are sort of getting the idea now, right? So I like to kind of simplify them down to these things, right? There's kind of this learning stage, a feeling stage, and a behavioral stage, or a doing stage, right? Learn, feel, do. That maps onto the whole science and art thing, right? That totally maps onto this whole emotion, reason side, right? Emotion, reason, behavior, those sorts of things. So if you start seeing those ways of thinking about them, and you start trying to break markets down, memorizing these boxes is somewhat irrelevant, right? Because all these things are sort of related to the cognitive component or your emotional component, and you're just sort of trying to break it down. What are the cognitive components? What are the affective components? And what are the behavioral components? So of these models, which one do you guys think I probably like the most? Very good. You guys did good. So ADA. The ADA model is one that I think about the most, and I'm sort of thinking about this: awareness, interest, desire, and action. And then, of course, you're always sort of at the bottom is trying to get this repeat purchase. So the ADA model is sort of one that you might think about. It's a lot easier to sort of remember those, right? And they sort of capture kind of the essence of things, but you're often sort of trying to figure out how are markets buying, why are they not buying, how do I influence the things that I need to influence. So in B2B markets, this is sort of more on the sales side. How many of you guys are in sales? A few people in sales. Okay, so on the sales side, so when you're selling to business buyers, a lot of times this is a very much more complex buyer, a much more informed buyer. This is a buyer that's thought of as being much more rational, much more economic, all those sorts of things, and you're often trying to figure out more about what are the relationships that exist from firm to firm, and how can you sort of leverage some of those different relationships, because so these relationships become more and more complex over time. But within organizations, this is a framework that sort of helps you break down, as I'm thinking about these different buyers, or these buying organizations. In some cases, they're buyers. In some cases, they're trying to influence these users. In some cases, they're influencers who sort of influence decisions. Some of the people in those organizations may be gatekeepers, so they're kind of keeping me from getting to the buyers, right? How do I kind of get through or work with gatekeepers? They may be initiators, who are basically people who initiate issues that are associated with we've got a problem. They may be deciders, so they may be part of the buying center, right? So these different deciders would kind of come into play. So sometimes you're just sort of trying to break down and understand how do these firms, or how does this particular firm sort of make different decisions. So this is just another model that is just getting at the same thing. What are some of the key factors that influence procurement processes? So it may be the extensiveness of the choice set. That's sort of like how many competitors are out there. Who else is sort of offering something that might be a substitute product? How much power does a buyer have, right? Powerful buyers like Walmart, they have more influence over decisions. How important is the purchase decision? Is it kind of a routine decision? Is it a habitual decision? These are a lot of different things that sort of affect sort of buying in business markets. So I'm not trying to go into like a lot of depth or detail, but just kind of prompt you on, think about how your buyers, whether they're consumers or businesses, make decisions to make purchases, and then sort of figure out how do you kind of go back at those different buyers and try to influence their decision-making processes. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, just kind of in the buying side. All the best with your efforts to master marketing and sales. I'm Gary Hunter, and I hope you have a great day.